Why has no one ever taught me about the nervous system in schools? Why did I not know that my own nervous system was at the heart of my lived experiences? That if I feel a certain way, like if I'm anxious or depressed, I don't have any control over that. It's involuntary. What I have is a response at my nervous system level to my perception of danger. And it's actually working for me all of the time, even though I think, why am I feeling like this? Hello, my friends, and a massive welcome to, I always feel like there should be a drum roll right now, Trauma and Narcissism Redefined. We finally got there. We've rebranded the podcast, finally. If you've been following me for a while, you will know that this has actually been a real journey in itself with my own nervous system to actually get to this stage where we've rebranded. I think I'm 4 cameras in now. Literally, as I look around my studio now, I've got all these other cameras as well, which I'm sure they'll have a place at some point. But I found the right one in the end with the help of my amazing team and podcast agency. And hopefully now you will not only be able to listen to this podcast on all the usual platforms like Spotify and Apple, but you'll also be able to go and watch over on YouTube. That means I've got to make sure at least I wash my hair a few times more than I do per week and don't just have in a ponytail. But what I have to say is at some point you're going to get to know me and I might have a ponytail, I might need my roots doing, and I might need everything else too, because at the end of the day, this is your podcast and I'm not sat here to be anything other than who I am, because at the end of the day, I am good enough for who I am, just like you are. And that's the whole point of this podcast. And really the whole point of why I've rebranded and moved it away from just being narcissistic abuse and trauma recovery into Trauma and Narcissism Redefined. And I'd love to share a little bit really about why I am doing that on today's podcast, because I'm hoping you will relate to a lot of that, because it's a really personal journey for me. And the more people that I speak to, the more people are like, yeah, that's me. So I feel like we're all going on this journey together of life at the end of the day, all trying to do the best we can, having good days and bad days. And just like I do, just like I'm sure you do as well. And the reason why, number of reasons, a few reasons why I've moved away from just being narcissistic abuse and trauma recovery and calling it that. The word narcissist and narcissistic abuse, you guys all know it's met with a bit of division, it's met with misunderstanding. And sometimes when I've asked some guests to come on, because it's called narcissistic abuse and trauma recovery, they're quite hesitant to come on. Now, by me shifting it into trauma and narcissism redefined, it allows me to maybe get some even better guests to come on as well. So that's why keep listening, keep obviously liking, subscribing, because the more numbers I have, the better the guests I can come and get for you as well. And I will quiz them and that too. So that's one of the reasons, because the word narcissist is received bizarrely differently to narcissism. That doesn't mean I'm still not going to be talking about narcissism on this podcast. I absolutely am, because it needs to be spoken about. And the reason why I'm calling the podcast Trauma and Narcissism Redefined is because we're not looking really at diagnosis as such on this podcast. We'll be talking about it. We'll be talking about things like narcissistic personality disorder. We'll be talking about anxiety, depression, all of those diagnoses that maybe many of you have. But the reason why I'm calling it redefined is because with the work that I do, I'm trained in something called internal family systems. So some of you may have heard of that, some of you may not. And internal family systems is an evidence-based parts therapy. So it's basically looking at us as all these kind of separate parts, these protector behaviors, thoughts, emotions that are there for us, always for us, even if we think that they are quite destructive. Even things like anxiety, depression, addiction, anger, self-harm, procrastination, perfectionism, people-pleasing. You know, all of these we might look at and think, I don't want them in my life. But actually for your inner system, they're always there with a loving intention, albeit sometimes with a destructive impact. So they're not maladaptations for you. It may look like it. They're actually adaptations and responses within your nervous system to try and keep you safe. The problem being is many of you are actually safe, but there's something likely from your past experiences that you've interpreted in a certain way that's kind of got filed away in your brain and in your body, that anything related to that, we have to show up as a protector behavior. So we'll be talking about those. And the reason why I'm calling it Trauma and Narcissism Redefined is because we're going to explore things like this. What is anxiety? What is depression? When we look at it from a nervous system perspective, anxiety, and I did a podcast about this a couple of weeks ago, anxiety really is a survival response in our fight, flight, sympathetic system in our body. Depression is really a freeze response within our body. So we're looking at it and labeling really where we are in our nervous system responses, and they're all part really for keeping you safe. You may have a diagnosis of depression or anxiety as such and not want that. I get that. However, it's there for a good reason for you. It's just about getting curious about what that reason is. And, that's something that we're going to talk about on the podcast. The redefinition of trauma, narcissism, really looking at things as nervous system responses, the biology, the neuroscience behind this. Why do we feel the way that we do? Because I believe when we start to see people as behaviors, what we're doing is we're missing who they are at the core. And that brings up a lot of shame for that individual. No child is bad. A child may have a bad behavior, but the bad behavior is often there for a reason. It's sending us a message as adults, as parents, as teachers. But if we're not listening to that for whatever reason, because maybe we're perceiving their bad behavior that, my child's behaving like this, I'm not a good enough parent, and then we go into some form of dysregulation and nervous system response, what we're dealing with then is we start to have that generational trauma piece too. So that redefinition of trauma and narcissism, we're not looking at things as the pathology. And even the word narcissist, you will listen to an abundance of my podcasts where I talk about narcissist with that word. And narcissism, it's not about narcissistic personality disorder. I don't attest to the medical diagnosis of narcissistic personality disorder. Firstly, because we should change it to narcissistic personality response, because that's individuals' response to their own pain. Doesn't make it right when they are projecting their pain outwardly in an abusive fashion, but it's actually a nervous system response for them to try and keep them safe. And also calling it the sort of narcissistic personality disorder and then medicalizing it, we're almost kind of excusing abuse, and we don't want to do that. And ultimately, if we look at all of the disorders and add the word response instead of disorder, we start to see they're just individuals' responses to their perception of danger and adaptations that are going on in their body. So we're going to look at these elements in the podcast over the coming weeks, months, years, because I'm here to stay, because I want you to start to understand, maybe there are things in your life, your behaviors, your thoughts, your emotions that maybe you feel shame about, maybe you feel really stuck and you don't know how to get out of that. And the reason why I want it to be broad as well as around narcissism is kind of that was my journey. When I came out of my marriage over 10 years ago, where I was married to a covert narcissist, I didn't even know I'd been in an abusive relationship. It was that covert and insidious. It's not like a light switch when you're in an abusive relationship. It's over a period of time. And as the abuser changes, you change too, and you become a shell of who you were. You become literally blended with so many of your own protective behaviors like dissociation. For me, it was dissociation, anxiety, depression, emotional eating. All of these were trying to numb me out from the pain of being in this abusive relationship. But I didn't cognitively and consciously realize I was in an abusive relationship because I'd literally, over the years, lost who I was. So when I look back at my marriage and when I came out and I realized I'd got PTSD, I now know that was complex PTSD. I'd got depression, anxiety. I was having panic attacks more or less on a daily basis. I was self-harming and I was at a really low ebb because I'd got no money. I was made homeless in 2013 with my 2 children and life was not good. I had no money. I had less than no money because I was left in over 70k debt. So as I started to look at my own healing journey and I was trying things like counseling at my local doctor's surgery and it actually made me feel worse. I tried talking therapy, and for me, whilst it helped in the moment as such, because someone was listening to me finally and I felt like, I'm being believed. The problem being is when I wasn't in that session and I was outside living my life, I felt worse. I actually felt like, what's wrong with me? I'm a failure because I'm having these sessions, but I feel like I'm going backwards. And that made me want to isolate myself even more. The inner critic would be showing up, saying all of these things to me like, you're useless, you're lazy, you're stupid, you're a failure. All of these harsh and critical words that I was saying to myself. Again, that inner critic was actually protecting me, almost to keep me on the floor, because if I stayed on the floor, there was nowhere else to go. There was no getting up and then someone knocking me down again. That would be painful. So actually, again, even the inner critic is a loving intention for you too. But what I realized then was, this isn't working. Why is this not working? And this is the traditional way that we use in society to try and heal from trauma, to try and feel better around mental health and well-being. And I realized it wasn't working for me. And I kept thinking for probably a number of years, it's just me, something wrong with me. And then due to my own medical background, I used to be a podiatrist. I've always been interested in sort of the medical piece in this. And I started to do my own research. I started to read. I started to listen to podcasts, YouTubes, read and research. And what I realized was this missing piece was the nervous system. Actually, it was body work, somatic work. And I thought, why has no one ever taught me about the nervous system in schools? Why did I not know that my own nervous system was at the heart of my lived experiences? That if I feel a certain way, like if I'm anxious or depressed, I don't have any control over that. It's involuntary. What I have is a response at my nervous system level to my perception of danger. And it's actually working for me all of the time, even though I think, why am I feeling like this? Because emotion overrides logic every time. So I didn't know about my nervous system. I wasn't taught about being socially engaged and feeling safe and connected. I didn't know about fight, flight, or freeze as a trauma response to our perception of danger. I just thought I'd heard these and I kind of thought, well, that's not me. I haven't had trauma. But we've all experienced some kind of trauma, every single one of us, and trauma doesn't have to be these big things that many of us think. It can be an unemotional parent. It can be your parents getting a divorce, not getting picked for a school team. Whilst they may seem small, I don't like the phrase big T, little t, because I think it's not a competition. It's about us as individuals and how we feel. And that is important to you. So it's not about this competition of my trauma's a bigger T than yours. Yeah, I don't attest to that. We're all individuals and we should all be supportive and being compassionate with each other too. That doesn't mean there's not some horrific things that I know many of you will have experienced. And I want to be there and help and support you in any way that I can. And that isn't diminishing those huge events that I know many of you will have experienced too. But as I was experiencing all of these elements coming out of my marriage, my mum had passed away really suddenly a year before me and my ex-husband had split up. So I'd kind of had a huge amount of loss. I'd lost my mum, I'd lost my marriage, I'd lost my home. I didn't have any money either. I just lost myself. I lost who I was along the way. And when I hit 40 in 2013, I kind of thought my life is over. I'm a mum. I need to just look after my kids. But my life was going to be downhill. At 40, I'm 50 years old now. And I feel like I'm living the most deeply connected and felt sense of my life than I've ever lived before. So regardless if you're watching this now and you're in your 60s and you're thinking, yeah, but Caroline, I'm 60 odd or 70 odd. No. I don't attest to that, okay? It isn't over until it's over. And you can live an amazing life right now. And I think this is the key part, the presence of where we are right now. So as I then started to realize I needed to work in my nervous system, I needed to do somatic work, I needed to understand the vagus nerve, I needed to understand all of these responses, this hierarchy of my nervous system with feeling safe and connected, what we call ventral vagal, the fight flight sympathetic response, the freeze response in what we call the dorsal vagal. And if you're thinking, Caroline, you're talking gobbledygook, don't worry. Keep listening to my podcast. I will teach you all of this stuff and I want to educate you on this so you understand this as well. Because when you know this, you can't unknow it. And nervous system education really is at the core for me on completely transforming how not only I felt about myself, but how I saw other people. I didn't see other people as out to get me. I didn't see people as their bad behavior. I saw them as wounded individuals projecting their pain outwardly. What I had control over was how I received that projection. And that's what I want for you. That doesn't mean it doesn't hurt when people are projecting their pain onto you. It does. It doesn't mean I don't get hurt or cry or even get angry if there are boundaries being ruptured. But ultimately, I know that is not me. How I feel is about me. I never think, how dare they say that they need to change? Because ultimately, I don't have that power to change them. What I have the power of is, why do I feel like this when they are projecting their pain? That is what I have. So as I started to recognize on my healing journey at this point, what I started to realize was actually going through that narcissistically abusive relationship was really about me starting my own healing journey around trauma and understanding the nervous system, around understanding adverse childhood experiences, around understanding attachment styles and the impact that had on my relationships, my friendships, the work that I was involved with, the people that I was attracting. Literally, it permeates through your life. And we're not taught this in schools. It's not on our curriculum. So I realized I needed to do something about this, and I'm the founder of a company called the Mental Wellbeing Company, and we're really driven to have these next generation solutions like this podcast so that this improves all of our mental health and well-being. It looks at nervous system regulation for all of us to understand. And this is a journey. It's an ongoing journey. And I would love you to come on this journey with me, that narcissism may be the catalyst for you to start to recognize all of that. Maybe it's some kind of past trauma that you're recognizing, you're attracting, and there's a lot of narcissism in your life with the other people. They go hand in hand and they also go separately. And I think that's the beauty, that on this podcast moving forward, I want to talk to you about narcissism, about trauma, all of those things. I want to bring on some amazing guests. I even want to do some live therapy and coaching sessions with people that might be CEOs and leaders that you might think they've got their stuff together. But have they? They're still human beings. And again, it might be someone in an abusive relationship. I want people to come on so I can work with them. So I want you to see how I work at a nervous system level, using internal family systems. Again, using things like somatic experiencing, using things like maybe brain spotting or EMDR or breath work or positive psychology, all of the things that I am trained in, and I integrate all together to work with my clients. Because I know every time anybody watches me work with clients, when we have, obviously the person has allowed that to happen, people take something away from that. They always have little nuggets along the way, and that's what I want for you. So if you want to come on my podcast and maybe be one of my clients so that I can work with you and we can bring in some elements, do drop me a message so that I can see, is this something that maybe we could work together and maybe we could film and record so that other people can be helped with maybe what you're experiencing too. So let me know with that. But I would love you to come on this journey with me with Trauma and Narcissism Redefined. I'm really excited because I want to get some great guests for you. I want to do some live sessions for you, and then just monologues like this where we can muse, we can talk and talk about all these different diagnoses and disorders that are out there. And again, I'm not a medical doctor, but what I do understand is the nervous system. I do understand the somatic piece in this, the parts element with that. And that integration together for me was transformational. That's what worked for me. That's why I'm so grounded 95% of the time. I'm still a human being. But the moment I start to feel any dysregulation or activation, I bring awareness to that with sensations. And then I'm able to work through that. So I'm really thrilled that you're here. Make sure you like, subscribe. You can listen to this. You can watch this. Come on this journey with me with Trauma and Narcissism Redefined. I'm so looking forward to maintaining and just helping inspire you, educate you, maybe take away these little pieces for you as well. Because as a 50-year-old woman, life is not over. It is only beginning at every single stage. And, I want you to know that you can thrive and flourish after trauma, after abuse. It doesn't have to be a life sentence. Take care, my friends, and I'll see you on the next episode of Trauma and Narcissism Redefined.